The story begins with a group of college students celebrating the start of their break with a big party on the beach. The young people are having fun, and the only person who seems unhappy is a girl named Kaylee. The person filming the party is surprised to see her there and offers her a drink, but she refuses. When she hears a commotion and sees Jonah arriving in a sports car, we discover the reason for her sadness. Kaylee and Jonah were a couple until he dumped her for Chanda, who is also at the party. The girls are excited about the guy's arrival, but he only has eyes for his new girlfriend. After seeing the two kiss, Kaylee changes her mind about the drink and takes a full glass. A guy named Mitch announces that everyone needs to give their phones to him so he can keep them in a bag. Some girls protest, saying they can't live without their phones, but Mitch doesn't care. Everyone read the party invitation and knew that tonight, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, meaning that nothing that happens here should be mentioned later, let alone filmed. Then friends Vance and Gilbert arrive, carrying a strange sphere they found on the beach. The thing looks bizarre and is covered in a sticky substance. Not giving it much importance, the others laugh at the duo for thinking they could make a bonfire with it. The party continues, and everyone is loosening up more and more, especially a girl named Marcia, who seems to have drunk too much and can no longer walk straight. Gilbert is the first to pass out, and his friends don't miss the chance to draw on his face. When dawn arrives, we see that many of the young people have fallen asleep right there. Lying next to Mitch, Kaylee opens her eyes and doesn't look very happy to have woken up in this situation. To make matters worse, the first thing she sees is Jonah with his girlfriend. Coming up behind her, Mitch says he's not offended by the look of regret on the girl's face. He invites her to go surfing, but Kaylee is upset and says she just wants to go home. Jonah is also waking up with a terrible hangover. Seeing that Kaylee is leaving, he almost goes after her but changes his mind when Chanda asks him where he's going. In the back seat, Vance is with a girl named Ronnie, and they wake up in a romantic mood. Marcia is still sleeping comfortably on a picnic table. Jonah honks the horn to wake her up, and the girl gets up feeling sick. The couples in the car want to leave soon and start rushing her. Meanwhile, Kaylee notices a bird that seems to be in trouble, as if it can't take off. Still looking in that direction, she makes a face of astonishment, and then we see that the bird is no longer where it was. Only she seems to have seen what happened to the bird. She tries to warn Marcia before the same thing happens to her, but it's too late. As soon as the girl steps onto the sand, her feet get stuck. Jonah and the others start laughing at Kaylee's concern, telling Marcia to stop playing around and get in the car. Trying to free her feet, she ends up putting her hand in the sand and can't pull it out anymore. Her despair is evident, and no one is laughing anymore. Still with Mitch on the lifeguard tower, Kaylee explains that something is wrong with the sand. Then Vance decides to rescue Marcia, and Ronnie can't hold him back. After a few quick steps, he stops abruptly and loses his balance, falling face first into the sand. Everyone is in distress at the scene, and Chanda asks why he isn't getting up, afraid to hear the answer. Then Vance starts calling for Ronnie and asking for help. She begins to cry, lacking the courage to leave. Jonah threatens to get down too, wanting to save his friend, but Chanda firmly stops him. Vance is starting to sink in the sand, and his cries grow quieter until he can hardly be heard. In tears, Ronnie is still trying to comfort her boyfriend, assuring him that everything will be okay and that he will be fine. However, she is completely mistaken. When Vance tries to free himself, we see that half of his face has practically melted. His friends freeze in fear as they realize that he is not just sinking. Just like the bird, Vance is being eaten by the sand. Seeing his friend disappear beneath the surface, Mitch almost has a breakdown and demands explanations about what he has just witnessed. The others are also lost, and Jonah tries to cling to rational explanations. He says there must be some quicksand in that area and that they need to start digging around to rescue Vance. Ronnie doesn't want to step in the sand, reminding Jonah that he also saw Vance's face and that no quicksand could have done that. She thinks it might be some chemical leak that has contaminated the beach, making contact with the sand lethal. Chanda begins to lose patience and orders someone to call the fire department, but all the phones are in the bag in the trunk. Jonah starts cursing Mitch for the stupid idea. The guy remains unfazed and tells his friends to stay calm because there's a very simple solution. Jonah is driving, so he can just give a ride to those two who are on the tower, and everyone can get out of there. It would be a great plan, except for the fact that Jonah left the lights on all night, and now the car has a dead battery. The young people begin complaining about their bad luck until they notice that Kaylee has come down the stairs and is getting closer to the sand. Mitch also runs down and asks if she's crazy, but she wants him to watch. She extends her hand, palm very close to the sand, but without touching it. Several translucent filaments begin to emerge from the ground, as if they were small tentacles trying to reach her, and they seem to grow a little as she pulls her hand back. It's then that Gilbert starts to wake up, stuck inside a trash can. He gets angry with his friends, guessing that someone put him there during the party. But what seems like a prank to him becomes very serious for the others when he starts moving, trying to tip the can over. He ignores his friends' pleas until Mitch manages to convince him to listen. Gilbert is shocked to learn that the sand has already swallowed 2 people, but when Mitch says there are little hairs hunting for victims, he doubts whether this is still a joke or not. Besides, the position is very uncomfortable, and he is in a lot of pain. Mitch tells him that the tide is rising, and the sea will reach him in about 2 hours. All he has to do is hang in there for a little longer. When Kaylee enters the booth with Mitch, Chanda comments that it's good those two hooked up. Jonah says nothing, but it's obvious he doesn't agree. Kaylee asks Mitch why he lied about the tide, and he explains that it's easier for Gilbert to withstand the situation if he has some sort of hope. While they calm their nerves with some vodka, Ronnie starts writing a letter to her mother in her notebook. Fear begins to give way to boredom as time passes, and only Kaylee still seems determined to solve the problem. Searching through the booth, she finds matches and puts them in her pocket while talking to Mitch. The guy reveals that there was nothing between them, but she already knew that. What she cannot understand is what happened to the beach. Up until the early hours of the morning, everyone was rolling in the sand without any problems, but obviously, something changed. Mitch doesn't know the answer to her questions, so she decides to share the issue with the others. Gilbert wants her to shut up, and Chanda also thinks the conversation is a waste of time. Only Jonah agrees with the initiative, saying they might discover how to get out of there if they understand the phenomenon better. They start reconstructing the events of the night and only then realize, horrified, that the other partygoers never left there. Most of them fell asleep in the sand, and that's why they never woke up again. Complaining about their bad luck so far, they finally realize how lucky they've actually been. The girls begin to cry, thinking of the dozens of people the beach has swallowed. The sun is already high, and they start applying sunscreen. Jonah throws the bottle to Gilbert, who almost falls off the can trying to catch it. Then Kaylee notices something sinister near the sea. It's that sphere that Gilbert and Vance found, only now it's open, as if something has come out of it. No one wants to say aloud what they are thinking until Ronnie completes the thought and says it looks like a monster's egg. Gilbert panics upon hearing that there's something alive in the sand, and Kaylee tries to calm him down, saying that the egg just opened. Anything that came out of it can't have grown much in such a short time. Excited by her idea, she throws a hot dog as far as she can. To everyone's disappointment, the deadly threads spring into action, sucking the hot dog below without wasting time. Kaylee doesn't give up on measuring the threat and continues throwing more hot dogs along the beach. Ronnie complains about this attitude, reminding them that they are stranded, and this is the only food available. Gilbert also begins to resent this until Mitch throws a hot dog, and a bird catches it in the air before landing right in front of the can. The sand immediately begins to engulf the bird, and the horrifying spectacle causes the guy to change his tone. While he tries to process what he just saw, Mitch throws another hot dog. Everyone watches tense for a few seconds because this time the small threads don't appear. The hot dog remains safe and sound, which confirms Kaylee's theory and helps define the deadly perimeter. Assessing the distance to that hot dog planted in the sand, Chanda and Ronnie don't get very excited about the discovery. Even though the safe area isn't too far away, it will be complicated to get there without stepping on the sand. Chanda prefers to wait until someone happens to find them, but Ronnie isn't very confident. The area tends to be almost deserted during spring break, which just started and lasts about 15 days. Besides, they don't even know if this is the only beach affected by this type of hostile organism. Pointing to the belongings of several friends who succumbed, Ronnie asks why no one has come looking for them yet. While the others lose motivation in light of these arguments, Jonah seems more driven than before. For him, the certainty that no one will come only confirms that the right thing to do is to fend for himself. He grabs 2 surfboards and climbs onto the car hood, throwing both onto the sand. His friends get nervous seeing he plans to jump, but he doesn't listen to anyone and manages to leap onto the board successfully. The plan is to create a sort of fragmented bridge, always moving from one board to the other. Kaylee screams when he crouches down, warning about the evil threads. Jonah then grabs the board with a quick motion and moves forward. Taking the moment for a personal confession, he expresses that he's jealous of Kaylee and a bit angry with Mitch, who has always been his best friend. Gilbert is outraged at the absurdity of this pause while Mitch steps away, embarrassed. Realizing that no one is in the mood to discuss relationships at a time like this, Jonah continues surfing on the sand until he reaches the bench. But just as he's about to climb up, the board suddenly slips backward, and he stretches out, trying to keep his balance. The other board begins to move away as if it has a life of its own. The girls gasp as they deduce that the sand is moving the objects and start screaming when they see the wicked threads eyeing Jonah's belly. Some manage to touch his skin, and the scare gives him the boost to jump. Even though it's so brief, the contact causes significant damage. Jonah starts to feel sick and screams in pain, while Ronnie says this can only be some kind of poison. After a few minutes, he manages to recover some strength and says he found a bag on the bench. In a rare moment of luck, he sees it's full of food. Picking up a banana, he accidentally drops it but grabs it back quickly. The others don't understand when he starts bringing the fruit closer to the ground as if checking something. He asks his friends to stay calm and then jumps with both feet into the sand, without warning. Everyone starts screaming, but nothing happens. He's right on top of where they made the bonfire yesterday, and the phenomenon seems not to occur in that area. Relaxed, Jonah begins to snack until Kaylee points at his belly in horror. Huge blisters are quickly forming and bursting with pus. Kaylee convinces him to return to the bench and check what else is in the bag. He throws some water to Gilbert and a soda to the girls, but when it's the turn of the other two, the effort becomes too much for him. He starts to feel very ill again and lies back down. Knowing that the guy doesn't have much chance of survival, Kaylee begins to cry, and then she sees the threads corroding the tires. She barely has time to warn the girls when the car crashes with a bang as the tire bursts. Frightened, they start thinking of a way to get their phones, and Ronnie decides to take a risk and juggle, asking Chanda to deliver the letter to her mother if something goes wrong. The car's metal is very hot, making the process even harder. Ronnie holds her friend's hand as she balances and inserts the key. It soon becomes clear that it's impossible to open the trunk this way, as the lid will separate the friends, and Ronnie will fall. Kaylee brings a long hook for her to hold onto as yet another tire bursts. The moment the trunk is finally opened, Gilbert sees a patrol car and begins waving. Ronnie gets startled by the horn and accidentally releases the lid, smashing her fingers and screaming in pain. An officer named Alex parks near them and warns that the beach is closed. He becomes suspicious upon seeing Ronnie hanging by her fingers and Gilbert stuck in the trash, so when the others start talking about monsters, he is certain these young people have used something illegal. Swearing she's sober, Kaylee begs him to stay away from the sand, but the credibility of the story only worsens when the officer steps out of the car and walks along the beach without any problem. Alex is very rude and unpleasant with everyone, openly mocking the victim's suffering and making a series of offensive comments. Mitch deduces that he is being spared because he's wearing shoes, but the officer doesn't want to hear him. He demands that the two come down from the tower and even threatens to use pepper spray if they don't obey. Then, Alex drops his keys and touches the sand to pick them up. His hands get trapped immediately and start sinking. Using the spray, he manages to free himself and get up, but one of his arms doesn't come with him. The horror is so great that he stumbles and falls, screaming for help. Knowing there's no way to help him, Kaylee worries more about grabbing the pepper spray. After the sand finishes engulfing the officer, Mitch announces the next plan. He's going to run to Alex's car with towels wrapped around his feet. Gilbert applauds the idea, and Chanda throws one of the towels to him. When Mitch leans over to grab it, the railing gives way under his weight, and the guy falls out stretched on the sand. Hundreds of threads stick to his body, and the sand eats him away mercilessly. In a few minutes, only a red stain marks where the guy was. Kaylee doesn't let the loss paralyze her and convinces Chanda to help her gather the pieces of the railing to build a bridge to the others. Courageously, she jumps into the car and resolves the jealousy issue with a single punch to Chanda's face so that they can move on without that tension. Jonah is still very ill, but he gathers his strength to apologize to Kaylee. She asks him to hang in there a little longer, and then helps Chanda free Ronnie's hand. Kaylee also asks Gilbert to try to turn his body toward them, which isn't very easy. The edge of the can is very sharp and begins to scratch him. The bridge made with the railing is even more unstable than the boards, but Chanda has remarkable agility. Just like Jonah, she also decides to open her heart during the crossing, confessing that she separated the couple to experience the perfect romance they had. Arriving at the wooden bench, she sees that Jonah is getting much worse and asks the other two to hurry. Kaylee takes a little longer to cross the bridge, but soon joins her beloved. Then it's Ronnie's turn, who doesn't have the same luck. The bandage starts dripping into the sand, and she ends up losing her balance. Ronnie falls sideways, and Kaylee sprays pepper spray. For a moment, it seems to have worked, but when the friends pull her arm, Ronnie doesn't budge. She begins to scream in fear before being completely swallowed in a few seconds. Then Chanda decides to try Mitch's plan with the towels on her feet. Gilbert still hasn't noticed that the can is under attack, and when Chanda manages to reach the beach patrol car and climb onto the hood, he celebrates the victory with her until he senses some strange movement. The can begins to sway on its own, and the girls fear that the sand will take their friend away, but that's not what's happening. The bottom of the can has been completely corroded, and Gilbert is being attacked right there. Then, 3 greenish tentacles emerge from inside the can and wrap around his body in a terrible embrace before pulling him by the shoulders. Gilbert disappears inside the can, leaving few traces behind. From the initial group, only Jonah and his 2 girls remain. While they cry for Gilbert's loss, a tentacle hits the car and knocks down Chanda. She doesn't fall onto the sand but hits her head and loses consciousness. For all intents and purposes, Kaylee is practically alone now. At the limit of her strength, she hugs Jonah and cries until night falls. Then she begins calling her friend's name until she wakes her up. Chanda takes a moment to gather herself but soon starts searching the vehicle. She finds several emergency equipment, including an inflatable raft. Opening the raft, she jumps for joy as she sees it filling up, almost reaching the wooden bench. The stretch of sand is short, and she manages to cross to the other side with ease, helping Kaylee carry Jonah. His condition is concerning, and the two need to save him quickly. Kaylee is the last to get up in the car, telling Jonah that she loves him. The couple shares a passionate kiss, but then the ground begins to shake violently. She falls out of the car, and Chanda rushes to switch places with Jonah to save her friend. Suddenly, a massive tentacle emerges from the sand with a fierce roar. The thing moves through the air like a snake and lashes at the vehicle before retreating into the hole it opened. Without wasting time, Kaylee climbs onto the hood and runs to the back. She finds a spare gas can and manages to grab it, but the ground opens before her eyes, and a second tentacle shoots toward her, crushing the gas can and spilling gasoline everywhere. Kaylee struggles to keep her balance, and the creature seems stunned with part of the can stuck at the tip of the tentacle. Seizing the opportunity, she grabs the second can and pours its contents onto the sand. The phosphorescent light on her face warns that the monster is coming again, so she lights the matches she had saved in her pocket and sets the creature on fire. The tentacle starts thrashing as it is consumed by the flames. The girl watches in shock until Chanda calls her name. Coming out of her trance, she jumps back into the car and slams the door. One of the tentacles grabs the doorknob, pulling with all its might. Kaylee starts a tug-of-war with the creature, trying to keep the door shut. Dozens of smaller tentacles appear right in front of the car in a macabre dance. The girls scream in terror, not knowing what to do, but the monster seems to leave after a few minutes. Everything goes dark again, and Kaylee comments that not even this horror show was enough for someone to come to their rescue. Trying to stay calm, Chanda says maybe someone will come the next day, and Kaylee pretends to agree, feeling disheartened. Only then do they realize that Jonah has given up, unable to withstand the effects of the poison. The two girls cry and hug, losing hope of getting out of this. Exhausted, they fall asleep and sleep until morning when a stranger approaches and starts banging on the glass. They wake up startled, and he asks if they are okay. Kaylee opens the door and looks down in disbelief. Nothing comes out of the sand as her foot approaches, so she takes a few steps. Seeing that her friend is still intact, Chanda does the same, and the two begin to walk away from that deadly beach. The events of the previous day have left a huge hole in that area, and by now, the culprit is far away, swimming toward another beach.